Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar for this afternoon. What a wonderful way to finish a week. This is Increasing the Emotional Impact of the Visitor Experience. I'm really pleased to be welcoming Adrian Tissier today from the National Trust, who has had an absolutely fantastic career and been momentous in the development of lots of visitor experiences, particularly at the National Trust. But also, I will be on the line today. I'm Kate Measures, and that's not a picture of me in the top corner, as you will have guessed. And I will be facilitating the webinar today. And the other person on the line is Jenny Gadsby from our office, who will also be helping in the chat room. So if you look at the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see that there's a chat facility. We're going to take questions and comments and ideas halfway through the webinar, and then at the end again. And it would be lovely to have feedback and also your own ideas, comments, things you've seen, etc. as we go through. The more you input, the more everybody gets out of it. So that would be wonderful. So you can just type in there at any point, and then we will take those questions and comments halfway through and at the end, as I said. The webinar today will last around 1 hour, so we'll be finished by 3:30. Okay, so just a very quick slide, first of all, for those of you who are new to the webinars and the ReFresh project. The webinars are paid for and run by the ReFresh project, which is an Arts Council funded project run by the Museum Development Service in Surrey, East and West Sussex. It's a project of 12 museums and with one aim to refresh displays and improve the visitor experience. So today's webinar is absolutely fantastic and are starting to think about how we can more deeply engage our visitors in some of the stories that we want to tell. I'm here today because we're helping to coordinate phase 2 of this project. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Adrian Tissier, and he's going to take over talking and moving slides forward from now on. I know we're going to have a fantastic day, a fantastic webinar this afternoon, and I'm very, very pleased to have Adrian here with us. Over to you, Adrian.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone can hear me loud and clear. It's fantastic to be able to join you all this afternoon. As Kate said, what a great way to finish the week. And just before I say any more or introduce the subject, I just wanted to read you a quote I've just come into my inbox from the Guardian Culture Professionals Network. So I just think it's so apt. It could have been planned. There is a God out there. Tamsin Lovelace, who's Head of Communications and Development at the National Maritime Museum, Cornwall. And there's a little quote from her, which I thought would be such a really, really nice and apt introduction to what we're going to be discussing this afternoon. She says, "In every museum, there is a little bit of you, whether it's a recognition that history does mean something to you, and that maybe you should have listened harder at school, or finding that one object that makes your heart sing. It could be an appreciation that your family has connections with years of heritage, or simply a connection to the environment by which you're surrounded. Whatever, wherever, you will discover a little bit of you in every museum." I just think that's a really, really nice quote to get us off thinking about emotional impact, because for me, emotional impact is all about personal impact, and it's making personal connections with our visitors. I've been working for the National Trust now for 15 years, and in all that time, I've been working with different properties, trying to help them and support them make more meaningful connections and relationships with visitors. And it's absolutely amazing to see how this has really become so much more current in the heritage world generally. Over the last 10, 15 years, everyone now is talking about the personal relationship between the person and the place. So that's what we're going to be looking at over the next 40 minutes or so, with some time for you to ask some questions. I started with this slide just because I like it. I think it's fun. If any of you ever go to New England, look up the Lobster Shanty. I've not been myself, but I'd quite like to, judged by their sense of humour. Because when we think about emotional impact and visitor experience, so I suppose it's a good starting point to think about what do we mean, why are we doing it, and how do we do it? So in terms of what are we doing with emotional impact, as I said before, for me it's about making more meaningful and personal contact with our visitors. Why would we want to do that? Well, it seems like everybody in the whole world is out there trying to get more custom. We want to build our visitor numbers. We want more visitors. We want more types of visitors. And we want our visitors to keep on coming back and to tell their friends, to share their experiences on social media. And if you're like us in the National Trust, which, you know, we are a charity, we have a charitable purpose, we want people to buy into our cause. We want people to feel connected to us. We want them to feel connected to us, so maybe they'll become members and they'll help us financially, but we want them to feel connected to us so that they will feel that this is a meaningful part of their lives, because that's actually what we're a trust. So I think the Lobster Shanty does it by being a bit quirky, by using a sense of humour, but most of all, and I think this is my big point that I would want to make, what we're talking about here is having a real strong sense of who you are, a strong sense of your story, and a real confidence in the expression of that. And we in the National Trust have been doing an awful lot of work recently in thinking about what our places are, what are the stories, what is the strong story, and how do we connect with our visitors. You can't hope to connect, you can't hope to have a strong emotional impact if you're not really sure about your own story, about who you are, about what you want to say about yourselves. So it all starts with story, or as we call it in the National Trust, spirit of place. Okay. Let's have a look. So, what is visitor experience? And there again, I think in the last 10 to 20 years, the whole notion of visitor experience has changed massively throughout the heritage world. Where once it was more of a passive kind of thing. It was something where your visitor comes to your museum, it comes to your he or she comes to your site, and they look and they learn and they discover. But it was all done in a kind of didactic way. The museum or the heritage site or the stately home has a story, and it tells it in quite a direct one way format. And I think what's happened over the last 20 years is this has changed and it's become much more interactive. We hear this word interactive all the time. Everything is interactive these days and much more personalized. And that means that there's an opportunity to make your visitor experience more to the specific needs of your visitor. So if you look up the dictionary definition of experience, and experience is about active participation. So we've moved from passive learning to active participation. And that active participation is the thing that leads to the learning. It leads to the accumulation of knowledge or skill. So instead of an event or a place being experienced from the outside, it's experienced from the inside. It's you participate in and you live through events. And that's, the words visitor experience, they're very, very easy to say, they trip off the tongue. But actually, if we think about this is something where we're inviting people to live through an experience, that actually makes us think very, very hard about how we prepare our visitors and how we prepare our places to enable that living through or that participation to take place. So, emotional impact, it's everywhere. It's not just heritage. It's shops, it's business, it's restaurants, it's all over the place. It's outside, it's inside. Everybody, and we've been seeing this over the last 10 years, everybody is getting much more personal, much more interactive. So it's M&S were one of the leaders with this, with their your M&S. Just that's the simple addition of that word, but there's so much behind it. It makes the whole experience feel, or it prepares the person for a more personal relationship. Over on the top right of the screen there's that I think that's a fantastic advert from McDonald's, would you believe it? Who themselves are not shy of making that direct emotional impact. You're not alone, with that very emotionally impactful picture. I think that's quite amusing. Then at the bottom we have a poster from the Lake District, the new National Trust Visual Language in the Lakes, with that slogan, "We love the lakes." Where once the slogan might have been, "The lakes are important," or "Helping to look after the lakes," or "The lakes need your help." Now it's much more direct and much more emotionally impactful. We love the lakes. I think that's very significant. Bottom left, you've got children participating, interacting, being involved. And in the middle, you've got a picture from the one of the shops at Chatsworth, where it's not just a bay with items on it for you to pick and choose. No, it's the Duchess's choice. There she is, a picture of her, welcoming you into her house, welcoming you into her story, and wanting you to take part in that. And again, it's that being a part of the story, which is really underlying this whole emphasis on emotional impact. So how do we do it? How do we make it happen? How do we increase emotional impact? Well, for me, it's about the two S's, and they are service and story. So service is about people, it's about interactions with our people at any place, customer service, how we make our visitors feel special, how we make our visitors feel welcomed and valued, how we make them feel like this was a fantastic day for them and they want to come back. So service, customer service, all levels of service are absolutely crucial to this. And the other S, as I've already mentioned, is about story. Having a really strong story, being clear about what our story is and which elements of the story we're going to tell to which people to create that maximum impact, maximum emotional impact. So the example of the story there is from Kensington Palace, and the introduction to the Queen State Apartments says, "Discover the tragic story of young Prince William Henry, the last of the Stuarts, in a dreamlike theatrical installation in Queen Mary II's apartments." So they're very, very clear about the type of story they want to tell to create that emotional impact that's going to really grab the visitor's attention, it's going to bring them in. It's not just discover the story, it's discover the tragic story. So there's drama, there's something there that's really going to whet the appetite of the visitor. And it's not just a tragic story, it's a tragic story told in a dreamlike theatrical installation. So they're using every technique that they can to make that story come alive, to make that story more appealing. So it's obvious that they have thought long and hard about how to really engage with the visitors, and they've gone straight for the jugular there with that tragic storyline. So what we're about here is unleashing passion in people, unleashing the passion of people, so that our visitors get passionate about our places, and our staff and volunteers share their passion with the visitors. So there's a two-way connection there, but it's all about passion. It's all about making connections. and it's all about participation and involvement. You live the story. You become a part of the story. We're all used to this with children's interactive activities, but more and more it's not just for children, it's for everybody, it's for all visitors. And it's about letting places speak. It's about giving places a voice, so that the place isn't just somewhere where you come and you look on from the outside. It's somewhere. It's somewhere where you can actually get under the skin of the place, and you can feel an emotional, a spiritual connection with it. Whether it's by storytelling, like the slide on the left there from Mamtor in the Peak District, where the visitors are brought into the stories of the Iron Age hill fort and the people who lived there thousands of years ago, or whether it's an artistic installation and participation event in Box Hill on the South Downs, which was run by an arts company called Red Earth. And the end game, so why are we doing all this? We're doing all this because we know people like it, because we know people, our visitors, want to feel welcomed, they want to feel valued, and if we treat them like this, they will appreciate it, they will tick the very enjoyable box in our visitor surveys, and they will come back time and time again. So the staff are very welcoming, the guide obviously loved Sizer, was so enthusiastic, very helpful, friendly staff, it added to our experience. So, and every person my wife and I met had a smile on their face. Lovely day all round. That warm and friendly, the passion for the place, they're such important things that we can add to by having a clear story and fantastic service. Okay, I'm aware that I'm talking lots and lots and lots here with lots and lots of ideas hitting you on a Friday afternoon. Those are the introductory slides. The ones that are going to come afterwards in a moment show some case studies of different places that are doing this. I'm going to talk through how they do it. But I just thought this might be a nice opportunity to pause and just take a few questions or comments if there are any.
Great, thank you very much, Adrian. Great introduction. I just put a question in the comments box there, actually. Where have you been emotionally engaged by a visitor experience? Has anybody on the webinar today got any examples that have really stuck with them, that they've really been emotionally engaged by, that they could share with us? I really liked some of the examples you gave there, Adrian, with the I loved the iPhone one. That was very funny. And the M&S, just a slight shift in their positioning has really made their language so much more inclusive, to make customers feel part of the experience rather than just someone consuming from it. So I think there's certainly great lessons that we can learn from those organisations. So just waiting to see if there's any questions or comments, or anybody's got any examples that they can share.
I think that's right, Kate, about the M&S, and we see it more and more with so many different shops and restaurants now. I'm sure everybody's had experience of that, where the whole personality of the place seems geared to making individual connections with people.
Yeah, absolutely, and that much more personal approach. After the webinar, if anyone wants to have a look, there's some great examples on our Flickr site as well of other sites that have really started to use that much more inclusive language and much more inclusive approach. And whereas some of the examples, aren't museums and not the kinds of things that we're doing day to day, we can take those ideas and translate them across to museums. Even something like writing a text label for an object can be just as personal as some of those things that we were looking at. I'm just aware we haven't got any questions or examples coming through. So, Adrian, if you want to carry on.
Okay, yeah, that's absolutely fine. Okay, Right. So, so some examples of where I think places are really thinking about emotional impact. And I don't know if anyone's been to the Harry Potter studio tour. Now, I think this is... Sorry?
Adrian, sorry. I'm just very glad you've included this.
Okay.
I love this one. Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. I think this is, I think for me, what's striking about this is that they're starting, obviously, with a very, very strong story. I mean, it's easy for them in a sense because they're onto a winner with a compelling story, a popularly, sensationally successful story, but they haven't rested on their laurels. They've used that story to inform and infuse every aspect of the visitor experience, including, very importantly for them, obviously, the shop, which is a hugely important commercially successful enterprise. But it's interesting for me as a visitor how the shop feels like an integral part of the whole story, feels like an integral part of the whole visit experience. It's almost indistinguishable from the actual visit part of the place. So that the shop tells the story in the look, not just in the look, not just in the decoration. They even have assistants there doing demonstrations, so they don't just have wands on shelves. They have people showing you how to use the wands, telling stories. It's all part of a dynamic and interactive, emotionally engaging experience. And also, what was very impressive, the time when I went, which was, by the time we got in, it was quite late in the evening, and the staff are on their feet all day, and the queues are there all day, but they're smiling and engaging and just making the whole experience feel special for everybody. So it felt like that, for me, is a brilliant fusion of great service and great story, and all blended in a really, really powerful experience. So next, I thought this was an interesting example because this is something that maybe you in your places will be familiar with in terms of an object, a museum object in a case, and there is no person interpreting it, so we just have to rely on text. But I thought that the text here was very, very cleverly put together, and that there's a great mixture of different types of text as well. So here in the Imperial War Museum North, we have an artificial leg, and but the large text on the case says, "They put me in a hospital in Liverpool and they did a second amputation on my right leg. They were going to do one on my left one, but I managed to talk them out of that." So I thought that was quite nice because there was a bit of almost like black humor there. But what was really good was that this is the personal voice. It's not, this is an example of an artificial leg. It was used in the Second World War. It belonged to blah. It's actually, we're taken straight into the story with a quote. And this is something we can all do. This isn't incredibly high tech. I just thought the use of the first person in that label is incredibly powerful. It brings the visitor right into the story and then leads you then on to reading more about it, which is in more traditional sort of museum text layout in third person, where you can read more facts if you want to. So I think that's a really nice, simple and easy way to bring the visitor into the story through that direct emotional impact, and again with a little bit of use of dark humor, which actually just makes it I don't know, for me it just takes a little bit of the stuffiness out of what could potentially be a little bit dry. And then of course we have more stories which are incredibly powerful in themselves. You almost need to do very little. And that's exactly what happens here in the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, where one of the main exhibits is a pile of shoes That's just it. And the starkness of the objects tell their own story. Obviously, you have a context there that people understand, and you can have photographs as well to support the objects. But often, an object doesn't need a huge amount of text. It all depends on the way the objects are displayed, the presentation, and the context that can create a huge emotional impact. So it's not necessarily about worrying too much about writing the right thing or the right story. This is a particular favourite of mine. Don't know if anyone's been to the Foundling Museum in London. Absolutely worth a visit. It's near Russell Square. I went last year. Very, very interesting place because it's a museum that was set up to tell the story of the Foundling Hospital, which was a place for abandoned children and orphans, set up by 3 philanthropists, and has a very important art collection, as well as telling the story of these young children. And this, the picture here, is part of the introductory gallery, and I think that they use those objects there incredibly well, incredibly cleverly, to introduce the visitor into the story of this place. And once again, notice that it's first person. It's a direct introduction into the story. This is the voice of one of the children. It's so interesting to me to see places that are very confident in letting their voices speak out loud and clear. I want a home where I feel loved. And this actually is an art installation. So they worked with an artist for about 6 months who did workshops with local schools. And the end piece of art is just incredibly simple, but incredibly powerful. So it's a row of children's shirts with those quotes around it. And actually, when you go closer, you see the name tag on each shirt has another quote on it as well. So you see the child's name, and you also see some of their own words. And you go along the row, and you read those little snatches of conversation, and it builds up and builds up, and the cumulative effect is that you have this incredible, very simple but very powerful emotional experience as your introduction to this gallery. And actually, you don't need to know anymore. That's it. That's the story. And then you can go around and appreciate and look at and see the other objects within that context. I think that works extremely well. Here again is an example of a place which I think can create an emotional impact through using contemporary art. This, for anyone, you might recognise it, this is Field by Antony Gormley, and it's part of the Arts Council collection, which is available for loan. So the National Trust property of Barrington Court, which doesn't have any collections of its own, it has empty rooms. So it's ideal for this kind of installation or exhibition. It had these on display, I think it was last year or the year before, and just to create an impact. So for visitors walking around, the juxtaposition of old and new, of something striking, something different, is designed to really provoke, to challenge, to get under the skin of the visitors. And I think it actually goes back to the whole purpose of interpretation, which is, if you remember your Freeman Tilden, provoke, relate, reveal. And I love the potential of contemporary art to do that, to be quite provoking on a number of different levels, really. And here again, here's an outdoor example, which I think is doing the same thing. This is an example of art in the outdoors at Croft Castle, another National Trust property. It's by the artist Philippa Lawrence, and this was part of a 6-month residency and again was designed to make people stop, think differently about a place, challenge their preconceptions, make them, actually the effect, what it did make people do was go out and explore parts of the property that they hadn't normally gone to. So this was a dead oak tree out in an outlying part of the property. Most people coming to Croft Castle would go to the castle and the surrounding courtyard and spend most of the time there. As a result of this art project, they had thousands more people exploring the wider landscape. But it's possible through partnership project with arts organisations. So, I think here we have probably something that is very familiar in interpretation, but just because it's familiar doesn't mean to say it's not good. And actually, we know from our visitor surveys that still the most popular form of interpretation is personal, one-to-one live interpretation, whether costumed or not costumed. Our visitors tell us time and time again that their favourite way of finding out about a place is through people talking to them. And that's whether it's adults or children, the personal interactions are always incredibly popular. And again, I think this is something that can be as simple or as complicated as you want to make it. So here we have a volunteer in the costume of a servant at Cork Abbey, and she's sitting on a chair in a room, and she has an object, a little box, and she invites people over to have a look at the box, to touch it, to look inside it, and she tells them about it. Now, this can either be done in third person or in first person. If in first person, then it needs more careful planning, as some of you will probably know if you've tried that. But if it's third person, it can be done quite simply. Here is a box. Do you want to know what it is? Have a look, have a feel. This has got lots of stories attached to it. It can be the beginning of a bit of a storytelling session. I love the flexibility of this type of approach. It can be taken in so many different ways. You can adapt it for different audiences. And all the time, you've got the costume that the person is wearing that is also engaging the people and that's telling the story as well, so that you're working on the visitors' emotions in a number of different levels. So you have emotional impact and personal engagement as well. More live interpretation. The Big Pit is the National Coal Mining Museum in South Wales, and we have people in costume. And the interesting thing here is that the costume well, it's real, as in it's actually what these people wore to go down the pit. And the other interesting thing is that a lot of the interpreters are ex-miners, so they actually are the people who wore those clothes and went down and worked in the pit. So it really is real. It becomes more real than real. And when you get dressed up to go down with them, you are living the experience. So that thing about visitor experience being lived in, being participated in, is absolutely very real here. And this is, I'm sure this is one of the reasons why it won Museum of the Year a few years ago. It's the power of that experience. And you might say, well, it's easy for them to do that. They've got that. But actually, they've had to just work out the best way to make that place come alive. And actually, when you think about it, it's really quite simple. Put a helmet, put a light, put a safety belt on some people and take them down the pit with the people who work there. What could be simpler than that? And when you get down there, they take you to where the coal was mined, and they tell you stories, some of the anecdotes, some of the jokes, but also some of the really sad and tragic stories as well. So by really careful thinking about the stories you want to tell, and by creating contrasts in your storytelling, you can create a really rich and rounded experience. I found it very powerful indeed, very, very effective. It's something where you go away that you really remember it for a long time afterwards. And I think that is really so important here, that we want experiences that people take away and keep with them. You don't want people to come to your place, go around, have a nice time, go away and forget about it. We want to really get under their skin. We want to make strong links, strong connections with people. Because if we don't, as we know, there are so many other things going on in the world, so many other competitors out there vying for attention, that we won't stand a chance. And that again is another reason why emotional impact is top of the agenda for so many places. It does have that potential to really, really make a lasting connection with people. Oops. And here we have Ironbridge, which again I'm sure many of you are familiar with, where again it's more immersive. We have the whole Victorian town, where it feels like you suspend your disbelief and you actually are there. You go back in time and you experience that historical period. And everywhere and everyone, all the interpreters and all the places are dressed in the way that makes that time come alive. So it is like you are walking on a film set. Now, I know some people like that more than others, but as a way of actually immersing the visitor in the experience, helping them to participate, helping them to live it, helping them to really understand it and be a part of it, it can work very, very well. It can be very, very effective. Rather than just saying this was a Victorian town and this happened here, you're invited to be a part of it. And you change your money and you use pounds, shillings and pence, and there are opportunities to get dressed up and there are opportunities to eat Victorian food. So the whole thing becomes more immersive, more involving. Obviously that requires more resource, but if that's the right thing for you to do, then it feels like it's a very successful model. And obviously there is the potential to have quite a deep level of involvement. And again, I'm sure people are familiar with these Victorian schoolroom experiences, which are often done for school visits, but they can be done for the general public as well. And this is at the Workhouse National Trust property, where the children are dressed as the Victorian children and have a lesson from a Victorian schoolmistress and get told off and shouted at. And I've seen it when someone comes out and there's a pretend punishment goes on as well. I've actually seen one of these lessons where a child has ended up crying. So obviously, sometimes you've got to be really quite careful. But if that's bringing home the reality of it, well, fair enough. But obviously, you have to be quite careful about this. But again, it's an obvious example of how that total immersion, it can be a very, very powerful way to convey the reality of a historical time or a historical place. And so what's the end game? So the end game of all of this is our visitors feeling involved, feeling passionate, feeling like they've been taken on a journey, feeling a greater sense of connection, and feeling like their needs have been listened to and taken account of. And that's where you link service and story, you can get what I believe is the most powerful visitor experience. And you have absolutely blown away by your place, wanting to come again, wanting to tell all their friends, wanting to spend their money, wanting to stay longer, wanting to join, wanting to volunteer. And that's what we see on our visitor surveys. We know that the places, the National Trust places that really, really get this right, get the most positive visitor comments, and really, really build long-term sustainable relationships, which are absolutely, in these cash-strapped times, are absolutely essential, both from a sustainability point of view, but also, as I said earlier, from a commitment to the cause point of view. And that is the end of my slides.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adrian. Really, really enjoyed that, and really interested to hear about lots of the examples, and really starting us to think about how we can take the kind of concepts of those examples and apply them to whatever project we're looking at to really create that emotional engagement. Which would be absolutely fantastic. I'm going to open up the floor to any questions or comments now. You can use the chat box in the left-hand side of the screen to pose any questions to Adrian. You have him for a few more minutes, so it would be wonderful if anybody has any questions. And also, if anybody's got any examples that they've seen, or actually examples of where things didn't work and they really should have done, those would be fantastic as well. You can see that in the chat box I've also put, Adrian mentioned Friedman Tilman's interpretation principles, which you may or may not be familiar with, and I've put a link to the Provoke, Relate, Reveal PDF, and also to the 6 principles as well. If anybody wants any other links, just let me know and we can put those into the chat too, or send them round afterwards. Adrian, is there any, in the absence of any comments from anybody in questions at the moment, is there anywhere that you've seen where you've been really disappointed in the kind of level of emotional engagement where you thought, actually really this should work?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting that I suppose places like the British Museum and places like some of the major art galleries, which I think for their and I'm sure it's a question of resource, but I suppose what disappoints me is that sometimes you see some really fantastic temporary exhibitions, but their actual traditional permanent stuff on display can be incredibly disappointing and incredibly dry. Now I know that it's horses for courses, and everybody likes different things, but I think there is I think where you just see traditional cases and traditional sort of labels, I just think people generally expect more than that these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we've got a couple of questions and comments there. 3 actually. I'll just take Katrina's first. For Katrina from Fishbourne and Roman Palace, using real quotes is very effective in generating an emotional response, but I wonder if you can give some thoughts on what alternatives there might be for further back in time, because obviously Katrina's looking at the Roman Palace, and we're looking at some ancient history and archaeology, which may not have those quotes to back it up as well, making connections with the prehistory site, for example.
Yeah, I think that's quite interesting, and I think one of my favourites is storytelling, where you can sort of tell stories about the place and bring it to life that way. But I think there's an opportunity there to use the personal involvement of the archaeologists or the historians who first discovered the site. So there is a way of using quotes through the people who have discovered these places and tried to find out about them, and that's absolutely fascinating, isn't it? These sites where in the absence of a great deal of historical information. So much of these sites is about interpretation or guesswork about what they were, and the different ideas that people have come from. So engaging people in that kind of debate through the voices of the historians or the archaeologists, I think, is a real opportunity.
Absolutely. I've just also put a link on the chat there to the Cairngorm Centre, which is in Loch Tay in Scotland, and that's all prehistory and slightly later history as well. But they really bring the whole thing to life by giving it an amazingly impactful experience, and they give it a real personal nature. And that's because they really connect with people's everyday lives, about how the things that we can all connect with, about love and loss, about daily routine, eating, living, those kinds of things. So those are great ways into things that we may well know about, but are great ways into emotionally engaging with visitors as well. Okay, so I've just got another question.
Sorry, Kate.
Go on.
Kate, another place that did that very well was the place I was criticising just a minute ago, the British Museum, in their Pompeii exhibition last year, where the choice of objects was so brilliantly done to show everyday life that it really enabled people to make a direct contact and to make and actually feel that they were really taking part in the everyday life of these people, which made then the ensuing tragedy all the more powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. So to create that emotional connection, and actually, in fact, that's really good storytelling that people like cinema directors will use to get emotional attachments with characters in the story and people, in this case, real people. So to then create a story that you really care about and you really care what happens to those people. So it's a brilliant technique to use, and one that we can steal from Hollywood, which is always useful, with people a lot more budget now. I'm going to go back to a question from Michelle, Michelle Lee from Rochester. I have a book that is in Latin and Old English. We need to give it a louder voice because it's dry on its own. Can you recommend where to start? Interesting one. Adrian, any thoughts?
I was going to say talk to Seamus Heaney, but I'm afraid we can't now because he's dead. But because he did that fantastic translation of Beowulf. I think there's something in using writers, though, using writers or artists or poets to engage with text and to engage with literature and to do a modern take on them. Simon Armitage as well has done a brilliant translation of Sir Gawain and the Green. I think there is an opportunity there for working in partnership with drama groups or writing groups or universities, university colleges. To me, it's about getting different perspectives, different voices. How do we make those texts come alive? And there are, and you mentioned Hollywood, and Hollywood uses the best writers. I think there's a real opportunity there to work with writers or with different arts types of organisations to bring those things alive.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd just also like to mention one of our ReFresh projects at Redoubt Military. I'm just trying to think of the proper title. Redoubt. I'm going to call it Military Museum and Fortress. That's it, in Eastbourne. And their current exhibition, archaeology exhibition, does have someone reading some Old English as an audio that's played as atmospheric throughout one of the galleries, because that would have been what the archaeology, the people that they're actually trying to tell the stories of, how they would have spoken and written if they wrote. So that really brings it to life, and actually has a real interest to it with someone speaking, and it's really just as an atmospheric sound within that particular gallery, and it works absolutely fantastically. Okay, so we've got a couple more here. I put a a link to the Pompeii exhibition, which is now closed, but there is some online information. And thanks to Colette, who also said that she agrees that the Pompeii exhibition is one of the best exhibitions she's seen. I really felt, despite being a modern exhibition setting, that you were walking through a Roman home. And I must say that I've had similar feedback from many museum professionals, that really was a success story, the Pompeii exhibition. Okay, Padmini, we've got a question there. Sorry, no, this is a comment. In Southampton, we used audio extracts from an interview with an archaeologist speaking about the site and his emotional response to what they discovered. It was on an audio post. That's fantastic. Padmini, thank you for that. Really great way of bringing it to life, and links with what Adrian was saying as well, about getting the experts to talk about the site as well. In the readout exhibition, the other thing that they've got is some quotes from the volunteers who've been working on the bones, on people's skeletons there, about the emotional connection that they made with the archaeological I can't speak now, thank God it's Friday, archaeological finds while they were working with them as well. So that was really actually very powerful, and some very short quotes, but actually was quite emotionally arresting. If you go onto our Flickr site, which is www.flickr.com/heritageinsider, all one word, you can see a online preview of this exhibition, and you can see some of those quotes as well and download the photos for free. Okay, let's see. I think there was just one more question. We still have a few minutes if there's any more questions or comments or examples that anybody wants to give. Just one more question from Jenny in our office here. What types of emotions, Adrian, do you think you can provoke in visitors, or what emotions do visitors most respond to in your experience?
I think, yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think the emotions you think you can provoke in your visitors, I think, is about what you feel your story is. I would go back to saying, having a really, really good think about what actually are you about? What are you? What is your story? What are you saying here? What do you want people to go away with, and why? Because actually, you can provoke any emotional response. It can be happiness, it can be sadness, it can be anger, and it is worth going to quite a few different places to see how they do it, especially where the more challenging topics, such as war, such as the Holocaust, because actually, such as there's the International Slavery Museum in Liverpool, which I think does a really good job. Because obviously you might think, well, there is a danger of becoming too heavy and too dark here. And actually, do people want this on a day out? Don't we think people want fun? People want entertainment. So there's a really interesting balance that you've got to strike. And so being really clear about what emotional response you want to evoke and why, I would say, has to go back to what your story is, what your theme is, what your proposition to the visitor is. And what emotions do visitors respond to? Well, I think they respond to honesty and integrity above everything else. I think they spot pretentiousness a mile off. I think humour is fantastic, but it has to be done well. It has to be done with integrity and authenticity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was just thinking about some examples I've seen before, and even things like peril. You can even feel kind of actually mild peril while like you're on the knife edge of a story as well. There's all sorts of emotions that you can evoke, and I think it's thinking intelligently about that at the beginning, and thinking really how to do that of the exhibition planning or the interpretation planning or visitor experience planning, and then also evaluating that, because there's often a lot of unexpected outcomes about how people react to things, and react to them in a different way to the way that you expected them to as well. Okay, so I have just also put a link onto our Flickr set, which is for the Eastbourne Ancestors exhibition, and thank you also to Karen from the Towner, who has also put a link to the official site for the Eastbourne Ancestors exhibition on there as well, if you want to see a low-budget exhibition that really emotionally engages you all the way through. Also, a quick plug that we have just had 2 case studies in museum practice, one of which I wrote and one of which Catherine at Readout wrote about this exhibition as well. That if you're a member of the Museums Association, you can log on to museum practice and have a look at about creating low-cost exhibitions and displays with the very emotionally engaging Eastbourne Ancestors exhibition as an example. Okay, final call for any questions or comments. I'd just like to thank Adrian for a fantastic presentation, some real food for thought and meat to think about this afternoon, and some great examples for us to start thinking about for our exhibitions and interpretation. Adrian, did you have any final points or anything else that you would like to say before we finish everything off?
Thank you all for being out there and listening and taking part. It's been great to have this discussion. I think it's interesting the whole thing about I think how we design our experiences. I think we just have to be very, very all the time very, very careful about how we shape our story, how we frame our story. So I go back and saying that you can't think too much about actually what it is you want to say, what is your story, how you shape it, how you design it. And I suppose the last thing to say is always, always, always talk and listen to your visitors, and keep talking and keep listening, because actually what they said week or last year might not be what they're wanting or what they're thinking this week or this year. So that, and certainly that is so true for all our places. You can never have enough information about your visitors.
Evaluate, 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 and consult. Thank you very much, Adrian. It's almost like I paid you to say that, but I'm so glad you finished on that note. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for a fantastic turnout to our webinar today. I really hope that you've enjoyed it and you've got a lot from the presentation. If there's any questions that come to mind after today, do feel free to email them through to katemeasures@hotmail.co.uk. Don't forget there's 3 more webinars. We've got a practical guide to visitor tracking, which is giving you some case studies, bound to be really interesting. There's still some places left on that one. A guide to the psychology of design for anybody who's looking at exhibition design. This is by a neuroscientist and a guy who does web design now and is also an author in the psychology of design. This is going to be hugely interesting. And then also a final one, working with communities to create displays and events, with Gail Bromley, with many, many years of experience at Kew Botanic Gardens in terms of turning Kew Botanic Gardens round to a much more community-focused organisation that is really consulting and co-creating with their audiences now where they never did before. So do log on to www.anymeeting.com/greedysquirrel, the same email as you, the same web address as you registered for this seminar to register for any of the others. I'm going to finish recording in a second. As soon as I do that, you'll be sent automatically to a survey. It's only very, very quick. It'll take you a minute to complete. If you could do that, it would be absolutely fantastic. If you have any other comments, I'd love those at katemeasures@hotmail.co.uk. All that remains for me to say is thank you, Adrian, for presenting to us today. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and have an absolutely smashing weekend, everybody.